This episode of the EdTech podcast is sponsored by LearnOcity. LearnOcity is the global leader in assessment solutions. Serving over 700 customers and more than 40 million learners, its mission is to advance education and learning worldwide with best-in-class technology. LearnOcity's specialised expertise and pre-built assessment APIs make it easy for modern learning platforms to quickly launch fully featured products, scale on demand, and always meet fast-evolving market needs. Visit learnocity.com today to discover how. This episode is sponsored by Worktrip. Worktrip is a curated and quality-vetted community marketplace for offsites, featuring specialist coaches, facilitators, inspiring speakers, relevant venues and experiences. Do you want to make team offsites more impactful and less of an admin headache? At Worktrip, our mission is to raise the value of your team offsites so that you can retain and develop your top talent and high-performance culture. We help companies to set goals for their offsites, discover and book suppliers, share information with their teams, and measure impact. Chat to us now at www.worktrip.com. Hello everyone, and welcome to the 250th episode of the EdTech podcast. For anyone who has listened over the past 6 years, or to anyone joining us today, thank you for subscribing and listening and being part of this amazing community. Our mission is to improve the dialogue between ed and tech for better innovation and impact, and this episode is no different. First up in this episode, here's my chat to Felix Atkin, the founder and CEO at Sharesiy. This is a timely update on the financial pressure schools face in these inflationary times as they return to a new term, and some ideas here on how technology can help to connect schools and communities to ease the situation for both. If you're a governor or school business manager, do listen in. Here we go.
So I'm Felix Atkin. I'm the founder and the CEO at Sharesiy. Sharesiy is a venue hire platform specifically for community spaces. We're working with schools, places of worship, community centres, right now in London, but growing very quickly. And we're helping those venues to reach their local audience and let out their spaces, generate some much needed income.
That's fantastic. And yeah, we've got chatting both from the EdTech world. So lots of your venues that you talk with are within the sort of school space. And then also from my interest point in terms of marketplace businesses. So I'm sort of obviously trying to grow one of those at the moment. So it's been great to finally sit down and have this conversation, and hopefully one of many more. I suppose if to sort of expand for those people listening who are in that educational space, so whether those are school leaders, school business managers, governors, can you tell us a little bit more about, what percentage of Sharesiy sort of meets the needs of that community, and some examples of where you've helped schools out, essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just a really interesting time for schools right now where funding is really challenging. Many schools are operating in deficit and now having to really put time into thinking about how to generate sustainable income. It's very, very challenging, and schools are already busy enough, not least with coming out of COVID. So Sharesiy is all about trying to just provide some tools to schools, particularly, to be able to manage their lettings in a very simple way, to be able to manage a calendar, to be able to manage payments, interactions back and forth with people who want to come and let out the space, just in a very simple way. So we've created a platform that's a bit like Airbnb. People in the local community can search for a local space. They can read all the information they might need to be able to make a booking, and they can make an immediate transaction. What that means for the school is that they don't need to have all that time consuming back and forth, talking to people. Payments are taken in a secure way, and our team helps with those interactions, actually. So we have a team that's supporting and answering questions for potential bookers. What that means is that schools are able to generate income with far less admin effort. We've got maybe 2/3 of our venues are schools, and we lean towards primary schools. Those primary schools don't necessarily have a team managing their lettings. Quite often it's managed by a school business manager, an office manager, sometimes it's the head teacher themselves. And we're a bit like an extension of their team. So on our platform, we create a really simple listing page with nice images, very easy to navigate. From a booker's perspective, it's a much better experience because they have all the information that they need. They can see all the available dates. They can speak to us if they have any questions. And then they get an immediate confirmation once that booking's been made. But actually, we're giving all the control to the school. The school decides how much they charge to rent their space. They decide on their own terms, and they're able to accept or decline bookings as they choose to. So really, we're just providing the tools to make the process a bit simpler for them.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I just, from the governor's point of view, from my own experience, I think there's something about having knowledge of what the going rate is for those assets, essentially, if you're renting them out, because it's not always entirely clear. And I think sometimes schools worry about, what rate should we be doing this, and have we got the resource to do that back and forth? But yeah, you're taking some of the legwork out of that, I suppose.
Absolutely. So actually, many of our venues have never let their spaces before at all. And now they're generating between £1,000 and £2,000 per month. Our top performing schools are earning well over £5,000 per month. So we're able to guide them, to help them with their existing relationships with current bookers, but we will also bring in a whole host of new bookers by promoting their space, by helping them communicate with that local community, and just raising awareness.
And what's the sort of typical booker so on the other side of things, what does that look like?
It's really interesting that actually the local community has just engaged amazingly with our venues. We get occasional bookers for people booking kids' birthday parties. It might be wellness events. It might be yoga and Pilates. We have business meetings and performances. We also then have what we call super bookers, who are booking long-term, regular recurring bookings. So a super booker is a long-term recurring booker. And that might be a kids club that's booking a particular time and place week in, week out into the future. What's great about that is it gives the school a recurring income. And we are proactively going out and helping to bring those types of bookings in.
Fantastic. And then finally, so what's the process if governing boards or schools want to sort of review how they can get involved with what Sharesies up to as well?
So we have really friendly terms. The incumbents in the market tend to have contract lock-ins, sometimes contract lock-ins of 3 to 5 years. They have upfront costs and fixed costs. For governors and for school management teams, that means it's a big decision to be able to take the first step into working with a supplier like that. With Sharesy, we don't have any contract lock-ins at all. We have no upfront costs, no fixed fees. So we're taking away the friction to be able to take that first step. We're finding that quite often our school head teachers are able to make the decisions themselves with support from their school business managers. But we also will support with the governors as well. And we quite often sit in on those meetings to be able to answer any questions that they may have. We found that the decision-making process is actually very manageable, where we're providing all the information up front and we're able to provide great case studies as to how this is working really well with other schools in the local area. We're being really geographically focused right now in London. That means that schools are able to see all those other schools in the local area that are having success with us. And of course, that really helps the conversation internally with schools as well.
Yeah, and if people want to kind of follow up, find out about Sharesy, where should they go to as well, just to wrap up?
So you can visit us at www.sharesy.com. you can reach out to us at hello@sharesy.com. We have all the information that you would need on our Become a Host page, so you can search for us. And we would love to have a conversation with any schools that are looking to open up their lettings. We have a very simple onboarding process. So reach out to us and we'll be back in touch very quickly.
That's wonderful. Well, thanks very much, Felix, and enjoy your deserved break this weekend.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to talk to you.
Thanks, Felix, for sharing all of your amazing work, and good luck with everything in the months ahead. Next up, here's my chat with Maureen Dunn, NeuroDiversity Advisor to Lego Foundation and the President and CEO of Autism Community Ventures. In this interview, Maureen talks about funding available for innovation supporting neurodiverse needs and approaches, and the strengths of neurodiverse leaders on tech company boards. And this has led me to some personal reflections on things like the prevalence of ADHD among entrepreneurs. So I really enjoyed this chat with Maureen, and I do hope that you enjoy it too. And finally, a big shout out to Learnosity and Worktrip for supporting this episode, and to Andre Skeppel and Full Spectrum. Andre is an entrepreneur I've been following in neurodiversity in EdTech for a number of years, and it's great to see his business really maturing and flourishing. So definitely go and check out what they're up to as well. That can be done at Full Spectrum, so spektrum.co.uk. So Full Spectrum with a k.co.uk. So shout out to Andre. And here we go. Here's my chat with Maureen. Well, Maureen, what time is it where you are?
It is currently 9:06 a.m. I'm on Central Standard Time. I'm in the Chicago area.
So that is a respectable time, but I don't know if you want to share with our listeners what you've managed to achieve already this morning.
Yeah, it was quite an emotional but important day. I've got 5-year-old triplets, 2 identical girls and a boy, and this was their first time they were riding a school bus. So, it was definitely an interesting morning. Two out of 3 were very, very excited. The third was a little nervous, as would be expected. So, it's interesting, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot about just the future of education and how technology fits in. But obviously that's my expertise. But I'm also now sort of living and breathing some of these issues as a parent too.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting crossover where the sort of academic answer and the known answer, and then how you experience that in a sort of personal setting, can sometimes be quite surprising.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for our listeners, Dr. Maureen Dunn is an experienced neurodiversity consultant, as we've just heard, an inclusion trainer, keynote speaker and entrepreneur as well, and is currently serving in the role as the senior advisor and special educational needs and disability expert at the Lego Foundation. And this is for the recently launched $20 million Play for All Accelerator Fund. So we'll find out all about that later in this episode. Dr. Dunn co-founded the first Neurodiversity Social Impact Investment Association. She is also a faculty affiliate at the Discovery Partners Institute, a $1 billion public-private partnership, where she spearheaded the Autism and Innovation Initiative in association with the University of Illinois. And this has the goal to revitalize the economy through partnerships that drive innovation and workforce development. And you have a whole raft of other incredible accolades. So my first question, just thinking about that amazing breadth of experience and given your vantage point and view over the longer term, is, do you agree that there is now perhaps a better understanding of the positives of neurodiversity, but still a lack of mainstream support for neurodiverse needs, both in school and in work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I've been part of this community for a really, really long time. I've played many different roles, and I've been part of achieving some of the progress at the same time. So certainly, there's a lot more awareness, a lot more appreciation, I think, for the strength-based approach that the neurodiversity paradigm offers. At the same time, there's also so much more work that we need to do, and I think that sometimes even when there's a lot of awareness, we've achieved certainly more, more significant level of public awareness. There's still sometimes a lot of well-meaning people that aren't really sure how to in practice achieve the sort of ideals that have been set out. And and also I've just seen more recently, I mentioned how my 5-year-old triplets have just started the first day of school, even just at the preschool level. My son in particular, who's neurodivergent, I mean, he had a number of challenges, and it was surprising to me to see that there's still a really strong need to shift mindsets. So even with the progress that we've made, there's still so much more that needs to happen. I think, especially in understanding these kids who sometimes have, or most of the time really have, what we would call spiky profiles, right? Like very, very unique talents and strengths and unique challenges. And the way the school system has been set up has for a long time been more, the inclination has been towards a sort of one size fits all. And that's been a problem because, there needs to be a more nuanced approach to be able to really see the potential of these kids. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of my later questions, but I can bring it forward, is, given all that work that you've done and that personal experience as well, what would you like to see come to reality? Because, I'm sure that over the years you've had many recommendations and that kind of thing, but what would you, if you could, would you fast track straight away to sort of bring that into reality more quickly?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, because I think I've got sort of two responses to that. One, I think more innovation in this space is critical, and this has been a space that has been massively underfunded. And it's one reason I'm really, really excited to be involved with the Lego Foundation Play for All Accelerator, because it's such a unique opportunity for these companies and organizations that are truly rethinking their platforms and building inclusive platforms, because I do believe that that's going to be a game changer to making the world more inclusive in the future and filling in some of these gaps at the schools. I mean, like the example I gave with my son, a lot of these teachers, to be fair to them too, some of them just don't have training. They're overwhelmed. They have 20 plus kids in a classroom, and they're not really quite sure how to meet the needs sometimes. And so I think that more innovation in this space and more investment in this space is critical. So the Lego Foundation Play for All Accelerator, that's what they're trying to do. And so, and maybe others will kind of join them and follow. And so I'm really excited about that. And then, but I would also say though, so that's in terms of fast track, I think the deeper problem is this issue of changing mindsets. And I'm not sure there really is a fast track approach to that. What certainly helps, though, I believe, is just having really broad representation of the neurodiversity community, in the media, in television, in books, in being included in any products that are being developed, being highlighted, just because I think what at each step of the way, whether it's, kindergarten or college or PhD graduates looking for a job, there still are these unconscious and inherent biases and stereotypes, and there's so many talented people out there and amazing people that should be highlighted, and people should understand how diverse and amazing and unique every neurodivergent individual is. And so I think there's more we can do to just try to break traditional stereotypes or images about what autism looks like, what ADHD looks like. A lot of the initial assessments and public images have been, sort of narrow examples, mostly boys. And, so I think that is, I'm not sure there's a fast track way to change mindsets, but I think it certainly helps people that come up and sort of, are public and are being represented in the community, that other people, that there's sort of challenge the sort of stereotypes or unconscious biases people might have.
Definitely. Well, I guess the first part of that answer, you mentioned the Playful Accelerator Fund. So, if you could tell us the details on who that funding's for, what kind of denominations are getting given out and to who, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah. And that program was in the making for many years. There was it started out with, there was a partnership with an organization called Play Included. And I know there was a lot of planning in the process. And I was brought on as the neurodiversity expert and senior advisor. There's so it launched in April of this past year, in April 2022, and it's a sort of a phased process. So there was 25 companies or organizations that initially were selected and received mentorship and training and some funding, and so that was for phase one. And then for phase two, there was 12 out of the 25 that were selected for up to $1 million grant. And so what's really, I think, phenomenal and extraordinary about what LEGO Foundation is doing is to make this kind of a commitment and investment in neurodiversity, investment in inclusion, and it be, no strings attached, equity free. I mean, it's a grant, and that's pretty much unheard of in this space. I mean, certainly there's, investors interested in this space, but there's also challenges in going to traditional VCs sometimes anyway. And, this program's really filling this such an important need to allow these startups to fully develop their product, make it evidence-based, and really meet needs, really critical needs in the world, especially filling in these gaps like we talked about, like in education. And then there's a phase three as well, then where a select number out of the 12 will become long-term partners of the LEGO Foundation and receive more funding and support. And then my understanding anyway is that this is a long-term commitment, and then that it'll be new cohorts going forward, and so it's I think it's really a game changer in my opinion for the community, and just making an investment in this space where currently it's just massively underfunded, and I think that's probably the biggest problem.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I guess one part of your discussion there as well was about innovation, and obviously it's all different forms of innovation. It doesn't have to just be technology itself, but we've chatted about the role of technology in supporting neurodiverse learners before. I was keen to sort of know from you as an expert in this space what you consider to be some of the better examples of technology as a positive force, and some examples when it may have actually worsened a situation for the neurodiverse. So I'm sure for people listening in, either as educators thinking about this or those trying to develop solutions, that would be of real interest to them.
Right. Yeah. And of course, every neurodivergent child is also unique. So there's not going to likely be a technology platform that's going to work for everyone. Having said that, I think I think it's tremendously important to have more innovations in the space that can be filling in these gaps. And if at least in terms of I'm also, you had mentioned that about the social impact investment association I co-founded, so I've been involved in this space outside of the Lego Foundation role for a long time as well. And I also support and fund neurodivergent founders and entrepreneurs and companies that commit to including a neurodivergent team member in a meaningful role, such as a C-suite role or a co-founder. But to answer your question, I think there's some obvious examples, at least from my perspective, like even the companies that Lego is supporting. I was really happy that there's such a broad range of companies and organizations that expand different geographies, different types of solutions. Some are hardware, some are software, some are programs. There's an interesting one called Felicia that's headquartered in London, and they produce an innovative input system for interfacing with connected devices. So I think there's huge potential there.
I've met the founders of Felicia. They're a great company.
Okay, yeah, they're pretty extraordinary. And so I've been trying to help them, because I believe in what they're doing, and I think that there's a lot of potential even beyond what they currently have as their product. You could get into like the future, thinking of like the Internet of Things and all these connected devices and all these. There's even more, I think, more potential for that company than even where they're currently at. But it's an interesting solution, especially for some kids that have more significant challenges, but also, in terms of communication, but also have a lot of strengths. And it's just a very accessible solution, and it's very broad. I mean, it's a solution that could also help adults that have had a stroke, or it's my kids have actually played for it, and they all really enjoyed it. It's really playful. It's a really interesting way of learning skills like turn taking and sharing, because they like my triplets, they each had their own Cosmo, right? And it just made it easier. There was and more motivating to be playing games, right? And there's this physical device that they're interacting with, and it seemed to make a difference in them learning that important skill, right? Of just take turn taking, right? And learning to share and those type of skills. But there's also other companies that are technically outside of ed tech, but still have a strong educational component, like Little Journey. They're working on a personalized care solution to help neurodivergent kids in clinical and hospital settings, which there tends to be a lot of anxiety. And so there's a huge need there as well. And so I think technology is hugely important to help neurodivergent kids. There's ways in which that their experience can be more enjoyable and playful, and where they feel like there's more of a sense of belonging and being included and having a personalized experience. So even, that company, they have different, ways of programs and curriculum where kids are able to prepare for, different types of hospital or clinical procedures or experiences, which can reduce anxiety and that in itself is, I think, hugely important for the quality of life for these kids. So there's these different, there's some very different companies that were selected in this next phase, but they're all, I think, amazing and certainly on the path of making a important social impact in this field.
Fantastic. And in terms of, any use of technology where you think it hasn't been thought through so coherently, or, it doesn't necessarily lead to that positive impact, are there any scenarios that you think that's a bit more questionable, or, where people should sort of put their red flags up?
Right. Well, without mentioning any names, I would say I think it's been well established there, and this gets a little bit out of the ed tech space, but there has been in the past, and I think most of them are no longer doing this kind of thing, but there has been some technology platforms more in the recruitment space that just weren't taking into consideration how their approach might bias or affect neurodivergent job seekers. And there was things, for example, and there was, different companies, I think that, were I think they had the right intention in mind, but we're doing things like trying to do like facial recognition and trying to understand like quantify social skills and translate that into like suitability for employment. And really that kind of thing, inherently obviously would be biasing against obviously neurodiversity encompasses a pretty broad range of different unique minds, ADHD, dyslexia, autistic, etc. But especially for some of the really brilliant autistic people that could, completely change the direction of a company with innovative ideas, and maybe, who knows, but maybe you're not going to in terms of understanding, like trying to evaluate facial expressions, and if someone smiled at the right moment, that's just not an appropriate way of judging whether that person is going to be a good employee.
I guess this goes back to the notion of like universal design, because I'm kind of uncomfortable anyway with this increasing use of sort of facial recognition, or whether someone's engaged. And like you say, when you boil it down to whether someone should be employed because they smile at the right moment, like how ridiculous does that sound? It's crazy.
Right. Well, and especially if there are individuals being excluded from the talent pool, and it's not, has nothing to do with whether or not they would actually perform exceedingly well in that position. And then there's cultural, differences too that have to be taken into consideration as well. Like somewhere like South Korea, where, it's considered a sign of respect to be, to not have as much direct eye contact, right? So there's all sorts of factors considered, but I think the biggest issue is trying to, again, going back to this, like, how do we shift mindsets? It's the hardest thing to do, but I think it's the most important long term, is how do we change how people think, so they at least question themselves? They at least take that extra time to take a step back and say, hey, is this the right process? Is this the best process for my company in attracting the best talent? Is there other ways of doing things that that's actually going to give us a competitive edge, if we rethink our processes and we audit ourselves essentially to try to eliminate these type of biases. Because I personally, I think, we're looking to the future, and, things are changing really rapidly, right? I mean, so even like, outside of, I mean, it's certainly going to affect education. There's no doubt about that. But even outside of education, like technology is going to become increasingly more integrated in just about every profession and every area of our life. And, unique skill sets, out of the box thinking, creativity, all of these types of skill sets are going to become increasingly important. And, personally, I feel like every organization should be going out of their way, and a company, to be recruiting more neurodivergent thinkers, if not for any other reason, to be a hedge against groupthink, right? Because you have individuals that have some really unique problem solving capabilities, and they're not going to be as sensitive to like social, I mean, for the most part, like they're not going to be as concerned or aware of like, okay, the whole group thinks this way, so I'm going to follow, the herd. And I think every organization and company, especially going into, when you think about where the future is going, needs someone like that, even on their leadership team, as a hedge against, like, it's actually a risk to their business and organization to not have someone willing to speak up and risk their social status and say, there's actually maybe a better way to be doing this. And, I see this differently. Let's open up the conversation. Let's think if there's a better way we can do this, because those, in my opinion, are the companies and the organizations that are going to be the most successful in the future, are the ones that can adapt, the ones that can be more open to new ways of thinking and different ways of thinking. And I think it's always a risk to have, if you have everyone that's, even in terms of their perceptual and analytical and cognitive capabilities being completely correlated, because they're not necessarily going to identify risks to the organization, or they might be more concerned about, the social issues or loss of social status if they speak up.
Yeah. I can say that's really fascinating. And you mentioned those scenarios where you have that alternative voice, and how critical that can be in terms of both innovation, but also mitigating against risk. Have you got any examples that you love to share of either particular boards or companies or innovators that benefit from neurodivergent thinking as well?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think I have a couple of reactions to that. I mean, one, there is extraordinary number of, if you look at history of trailblazers, people that have completely, changed our understanding of the world. That, whether they were open or not about it or diagnosed at the time, were clearly had a very unique mind and neurodivergent way of thinking. And I think, so there's several Nobel Prize winners. There's lots of entrepreneurs. We know Richard Branson is very open about his dyslexia, for instance, and, says it's not his dyslexia that his success, in his opinion, is because of his unique way of thinking and his dyslexia, not in spite of it. And so I think it's just, I think it's important, again, going back to the shifting mindsets of realizing, like, it's what some people see as a disability that could be a huge advantage in given the right environment, given the right context, given, there's a lot of research about people with ADHD, or, ADHDers really excelling in entrepreneurship, willing to take, more risk. And then, probably saw Elon Musk, for instance, was very public on Saturday Night Live not that long ago about having been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. So, I think there's so many, and then even when, the Lego Foundation Play for All Accelerator initially launched, we were being covered in the media. I can't tell you how many C-suite and senior vice presidents of major corporations wrote to me and told me privately that they were neurodivergent and were sort of debating whether they should tell their boss or be public about it. So there's a lot of people out there that their success and even their leadership abilities and their creativity and innovation is because they think different. But what we need to change is, where there's this sort of negative association with being different, right? That, there should be more of an appreciation of different unique ways of being and different thinking styles and different minds. And so I think there's tons of examples throughout history. There was also, you may be aware of JP Morgan in their Autism at Work program, because we, always have to keep in mind that with, even within autism, it's such a wide spectrum, right? And everyone is, in my opinion, should be valued as an individual and should be appreciated and given opportunities. And JP Morgan, for instance, they had a pilot study for their Autism at Work program where they showed that the autistic employees that they hired were, I think 48 48% more productive than the neurotypical employees in the same position. So, it's at least the evidence that we're looking at in many cases, it's certainly not that this population can't be really, really good at their job. I think there's some issues and biases in how people are being evaluated, in the initial selection process. And, especially for leaders, when you get into sort of more leadership or high level positions, it gets a little more complicated too, I think, because there's such a strong emphasis sometimes, even maybe perhaps unconsciously, of social familiarity with management, right? Who's going to the Christmas parties, who's going out to drinks.
Yeah.
And, this in neurodivergent people overall, they don't, really play office politics really well, but they're willing to, generally speaking, in my experience, really work really, 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 really hard and, probably more qualified than other people that get some of these jobs. And so there's that just that's hard to change. It goes back to changing mindsets, how, trying to change mindsets of what's the best way to evaluate talent that can really drive a company and organization forward in the future, and being open to doing things differently than has been done in the past. And I believe there should be, anyway, more motivation to do that now than ever, because, we're entering a period where technologies and artificial intelligence and robotics, are increasingly going to be becoming more integrated into our lives, and different ways of thinking and problem solving are going to become more and more important. And so I think, I think that it's important to really, really understand the value and appreciate the kind of talent, that can come along with hiring neurodivergent people. It's not charity. It can absolutely change a business, right? And their bottom line, as well. So
that's where I think at the beginning, where I think people are now starting to understand, okay, hang on, this is before perhaps those stereotypes really kind of were at the forefront, whereas I think now there are some better public examples or exposure to those public examples of, how brilliant that can be. But like you say, it's it is then, well, how do you take the steps to actually give those people the best experiences and environment to do their best work in the way that you would do for everyone else? So
right.
Yeah.
And it's very possible that if there was, I believe anyway, if there was more flexibility in how talent was being evaluated, not just in jobs, but earlier on, right, in the education system, and taking a more strength-based approach that could benefit everyone, not just neurodivergent children.
Absolutely. So when does the Play for All Accelerator Fund close in terms of actions that people might want to follow up with?
Well, we're in process. So we're, there was the first cohort selected, and we're in phase 2 now, and we'll be entering phase 3, the phase 3 competition in coming months. But my understanding, anyways, that this is a long-term commitment, and so companies and organizations that are interested in future cohorts can register their interest on the Lego Foundation website, and they can put in their emails and contact details, and then they'll, I believe, be alerted to the next phase application process.
Fantastic. And Dr. Maureen, if people want to find out more about your work, how should they go about doing that as well?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also reach out to me directly at my email address, which is Maureen, Maureen, at autismcommunityventures.org. So that, I think that's probably the most direct way to reach out to me, or you can follow me on LinkedIn.
That's wonderful. And in terms of your work, investing or backing companies that place neurodivergent talent into executive roles, if I understand that correctly,
Mm-hmm.
is that an international? Yes. Is that an international kind of endeavor, or to within the US at the moment?
We've been open. The current cohorts have been in the US so far, but it's been expanding, and we're really excited about. So we've got some really interesting companies that we are backing now, and we have partnerships with incubators. And there's 2 that are going to be presenting actually at the Stanford NeuroDiversity Summit in October about this program. And I'm also going to be delivering a keynote, mostly focused on the Lego Foundation Play for All Accelerator as well. But yeah, that's the NeuroDiverse entrepreneurship program, and I think it's pretty unique in that what we're trying to do there is so like with the Lego Foundation program, it's a lot of it is about like, hey, how can we really invest in this space that has been massively underfunded in the past, and and make sure that there's significant funding in promoting new innovations that can really make the world more inclusive in the future. And then this other program that I co-founded is because the Lego Foundation works a little bit focused on children, right? So that it's thinking much more about like, how do we start young and influence the world in the future and make it more inclusive. And this other program is more about, we know that especially for autistic people, the unemployment rate is still unacceptably high, and not everyone's going to fit into a large company, right? And so, just establishing new opportunity pathways is really, really important to me. And I think entrepreneurship is one that can work, right, for some people, not for everyone. And so we wanted, the goal there was I wanted to support people to be successful in that endeavor as an alternative way of employment. And so that company, I mean, that program is being expanded.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I think that brings us to the end. So thank you so much for sharing your work. I hope that you get the chance now to enjoy some reading or some peace and quiet in this special morning, your time. Yeah. And thanks so much for sharing everything you're doing. What we'll do, we'll get this edited.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all for this episode. My thanks to Maureen and to Felix and to Learnosity and Worktrip for supporting. If you enjoyed this episode, do share and tag someone else you think would enjoy. Otherwise, have a wonderful, wonderful week. A big shout out to our Queenie, who I think only now we're realising, whatever your views on the monarchy, that role of constancy, of consistency, of a sounding board to transient PMs, and the stoicism and dignity in which she took the role that was given to her and fulfilled that across her life. So trying to bring some of those qualities to my work as we all reflect on her death recently. So so let's be more Queen and have a wonderful week, as I said. Bye-bye.